Hello everybody and welcome to my series of micro lessons. These short lessons will focus on common errors that are often made when writing literature essays and will give you advice and guidance on how to fix them. So today we're going to look at how to make a response in relation to a question, and we're going to be specifically looking at ensuring that your point is clear, focused on the task and relevant. So let's just have a look at what the problem is. So the problem is that your point either doesn't address the question, or it's too long and it loses focus, which means that it becomes a little bit too confusing for the examiner. They're not quite sure what your idea is or the direction that your essay or this particular part of your essay is going in. So what is the solution? So begin by underlining the keywords in the question. Then you can brainstorm your ideas before you even start writing. Think about what the question is asking and the big ideas that you can comment on in response. Try not to say too much. Save this for your analysis. So you don't want to say everything in your point sentence because you want to save some of that for your explanation and for your analysis. You want to show that you are developing a good response. So let's just have a look at our example, and this is from Arthur Vella Miller's The Crucible. So the question that we're going to be looking at is, how does Miller present the effects of living in a repressed society? So I've done exactly what I've advised you to do here, and I've underlined the key words. So the effects of living in a repressed society. So I would initially start by brainstorming as many different effects of this as I can and how I can see this in the play. So let's have a look at our error example. In the play, Miller shows us that the girls become carried away with the idea of witchcraft and are easily manipulated by Abigail. Now, in the play, Miller does show us both of those things. He does show us that the girls get carried away, and he does show us how powerful and manipulative Abigail is. However, that does not directly go back to the question. So what are the effects of living in a repressed society? Definitely this idea of becoming carried away could be linked back to the question, but it isn't really clear yet. And also this idea of Abigail being powerful and Abigail having the ability to manipulate also could fit into this question, but it doesn't do that yet because it's not clear, and at the moment it does seem as if it's straying too far from what's been asked. So let's see how we can fix it. So in his play, The Crucible, Miller effectively presents the idea that repression leads to uncontrollable hysteria. So the point is now much more focused, and what we have in this point is we now have our own keyword. So we have our keyword that we've repeated from the question, repression, but then we've got our own keyword or phrase here, and this is now what we're trying to prove. So we now have our big idea. So hysteria is something that comes from a repressed society, and now we will talk about it in more detail. So we've taken this response here, carried away with the idea of witchcraft. That really is just talking about hysteria, so we'll use the word hysteria just to be a little bit more focused. And this idea of Abigail's manipulation, that can then come on later on, perhaps in an explanation. So we have the big idea, we have Miller's name, we have the name of the play, and we also have some interesting vocabulary here just to show that we're being very specific, and it makes our writing sound a little bit more academic. So let's look at a second example. This is a poetry example, and the question is, how is love presented in Carol Ann Duffy's Valentine? So we'll start with the error example. In the poem Valentine, Duffy shows that love doesn't have to be about traditional gifts such as flowers and chocolates, and instead can be unusual and thought-provoking. She shows that relationships can be multi-layered, and in doing so challenges our perceptions of what love is. Again, all of this is true, but this is a little bit long, and a lot of these ideas actually could be used later on as a way of explaining or analysing quotations. So there are some good ideas there. Let's see what we can do with it and what we can keep. So how we can fix it. So look how this is much more focused, much shorter, really gets to the point, and it's clear what our big idea is. In the poem Valentine, Duffy effectively conveys a version of love that is unconventional. So we've taken all of the different ideas that are being alluded to here, and we've summed it up in one word: unconventional. And again, this is our key word, which is why I've highlighted it or underlined it here, and this is what you'll come back to. And this is just an idea of where you will go with this. So this would be the rest or partially the rest of this paragraph. And what we've got is, you can see I've underlined all the references to this point over here, just to show you that actually too much is mentioned here. We don't need all of it in one place. And actually you can take some of these ideas, relationships being multi-layered. It's from here, so we've just moved it down so we can actually use those great words, use that great vocabulary in this explanation, but use it later on in the body of the paragraph. So here are just some of my top tips. So as I've gone through, I've tried to pick out for you all the different ways that you can effectively create a point sentence. And here are just some lasting ideas for you. Reword the question. Flip the question back around and then try and finish the sentence by adding a word or phrase that sums up your own idea. So if we look at how is love presented in Caroline Duffy's Valentine, you would just swap it around. Love is presented through, love is presented by, and that will help you. However you finish that sentence, that will help you then to figure out what the big ideas are. What are the big ideas that are being presented? Like I said earlier, brainstorm those. Those will then become your keywords in your point sentence. Think of precise adjectives and nouns that allow you to select multiple quotations as evidence. So as I was going through, I was underlining the key words that you create when you write your point sentence, the keywords that you're trying to prove that you will come back to. You also want to make sure that your point is big enough that you'll be able to find multiple quotations as evidence. You don't want to make it so that you can only really pick one quotation because what you've said is far too narrow. Don't say too much in your point sentence. Get to your point quickly and then move on to introducing and embedding your quotation. You will end up repeating yourself later. Check that you can find evidence for your point before you commit to it. So brainstorm your big ideas and then just quickly go back to your text and think, what would I use as my evidence? You want to be able to have 2 to 3 pieces of evidence for your point, and if you're really struggling to find more than one, then maybe find a different point. Use critical verbs and adverbs to add emphasis and make your writing sound more academic and focused. So if we have a look, we have effectively, conveys, and then we have effectively, presents. So those words really help you. You can think about words such as skillfully, powerfully. All those words really help you when you're trying to sound a little bit more academic and focused. And you can follow this structure as well. Don't forget, you need to have your author, the author's name, an adverb, an idea, and then link back to the key words in the question to show that you are focused and your point is relevant. So I hope you've enjoyed my micro lesson on how to create a clear, focused and relevant point. Thank you very much. Goodbye.